Good morning, students. This is T. Dube. I hope that all of you are in the best of your health in this COVID-19 pandemic situation. There is no second thought about this. There is no denying the fact that this COVID-19 pandemic has affected all of us, and in every possible manner. Socially, physically, mentally, psychologically, and above all, financially. But the question is, how long can we allow ourselves to be held hostage by this virus like this? It is changing its form after every 2 or 3 months. So we'll have to find out some ways to come out of it. So what can be that? I had been planning to create some YouTube content on English chapters of Standard 10 and 12. But I could not do so because I myself got infected with the virus. But now, when I have recovered fully and I feel that I can resume my work, so I am beginning the creation of the lectures from today. The content that I am creating on each and every chapter of Standard 10 and 12, I assure you, will be one of the best lectures available on YouTube channel. You can study by comparing different types of contents available on it. And please utilize it to score the highest marks in your coming examinations, whether this examination is internal or your coming board examination, that is final examination. In today's class, I am presenting this lecture on the first chapter of your book, First Flight, and the chapter is A Letter to God by Gl Fibantis. I have provided all types of questions in the video lecture. Before I begin the detailed discussion of the chapter, let me show you how this teaching session has been organized. Look at the screen, please, where I'll be discussing each and everything that has been given in the video. Look at the image, please. This is the Mexican author Gl Fibantis. As written in the description, you can see that Gl Fibantis was a Mexican novelist, poet, and journalist. He was one of the leading chroniclers of the Mexican Revolution. Chroniclers means storyteller, or you can say record maintainer. So after unsuccessful efforts at poetry and novels, he began to draw upon his experiences in the Mexican Revolution. The phrase draw upon means use. So after he failed, after he failed in writing poetry and novels, then he used his experience in the Mexican Revolution. Later on, he became a teacher of literature at school in Mexico City. Soon, he began writing. His stories were seen as exciting, humorous, and symbolic of Mexico. His most famous work is El Indio, that means the Indian, a fictional study of the life of Mexico's indigenous race. So let me clear one doubt here. This name of his fiction, El Indio, is not to be confused with the name of our country or any people from India. It is Gl Fibantis' novel. So this El Indio is a fictional study of the life of Mexico's indigenous, means native, or you can say original race of people. Now, after we have known something about Gl Fibantis, let us move to his very famous story, A Letter to God. Now, look at the screen, please. The title of the story, A Letter to God by Gl Fibantis. There are 2 short paragraphs under before you read. So let us understand these 2 short paragraphs before we start explanation of the story, because these paragraphs will help us understand what the story is going to be. So look at the first 2 lines of the paragraph. These lines read, "They say faith can move mountains, But what should we put our faith in? This is the question this story delicately poses. Lencho is a farmer who writes a letter to God when his crops are ruined, asking for 100 pesos. Does Lencho's letter reach God? Does God send him the money? Think what your answers to these questions would be and guess how the story continues before you begin to read. So what we see in these two paragraphs is that it is said that if you have faith, it can move mountains. That means your faith can move mountains. But the question is, what should we put or keep or repose our faith in? Right? So this is what this story is going to ask us. And as we come to know from the second paragraph that there is a farmer whose name is Lencho. And after his crops are destroyed, he writes a letter to God asking for 100 pesos. 100 pesos, you can understand 100 rupees, because peso is currency of Mexico. And this story has been written by a Mexican author. Therefore, he demands 100 rupees from God. So the question is, does his letter reach to God? And if it reaches him, does God send him 100 rupees? What do you think? Will Lencho receive 100 rupees from God? Let us see the answer to this question in this beautiful story and listen to my reading and explanation. After I complete the explanation, I will ask you a few questions so that you can understand the concept of this paragraph. So, let us understand the first paragraph. The house, the only one in the entire valley, sat on the crest of a low hill. From this height, one could see the river and the field of ripe corn dotted with the flowers that always promised a good harvest. The only thing the earth needed was a downpour or at least a shower. Throughout the morning, Lencho, who knew his fields intimately, had done nothing else but see the sky towards the northeast. Now, look at the image once again, and that very carefully, and then listen to my explanation in very simple language, because after the explanation I will ask you a few questions. So look at the image carefully. As you see, this opening paragraph begins with description of Lencho's house. It tells us that Lencho's house was the only house in the entire valley, and it was located on the top of a small hill. And from that height, that means from the height of the hill, as you can see, one could see the river and the field of ripe corn. As you can see in the image, the corn are filled, they are dotted with the flowers. Dotted with flowers means full of flowers, and that always promised a good harvest. That means from looking at image, you can see that the flowers are showing that it is going to give a good harvest. Means the production, the produce is going to be very good. But the only thing the earth, that means the field of the ripe corn, needed was a downpour, means a heavy rain, or even at least a shower. Throughout morning, Lencho, means the entire morning, all the morning, Lencho, who knew his fields intimately, that means who understood his fields quite well, had done nothing else but see the sky towards the northeast. So he had been looking up towards the sky in the northeast. Now take a notebook and write down important questions from this paragraph. The first question is, where was Lencho's house located? Question number 2. What did the flower-bearing cornfields show the signs of? And question number 3. Why did Lencho spend his entire morning looking up towards the sky? Now, after we have discussed this paragraph, let us move to the next paragraph. Look at the images carefully and listen to my reading and explanation carefully. And as I told you, at the end of the explanation, you will be asked some questions which are to be answered by you orally. Now, listen to the reading and explanation carefully. Now we are really going to get some water, women. The woman who was preparing supper replied, Yes, God willing. The older boys were working in the field, while the smaller ones were playing near the house until the women called to them all, Come for dinner. It was during the meal that, just as Lencho had predicted, you remember the first paragraph, big drops of rain began to fall. In the northeast, huge mountains of clouds could be seen approaching. The air was fresh and sweet. The man went out for no other reason than to have pleasure of feeling the rain on his body. And when he returned, he exclaimed. Now, you must underline the last 2-3 lines of this paragraph because this is very, very important. And listen to. These aren't raindrops falling from the sky. They are new coins. The big drops are 10-cent pieces and the little ones are 5s. Now, listen to the explanation of this paragraph and then you will be asked some questions. Look at the image carefully, please, and listen to my reading and explanation carefully. As you can see in the image, the entire field has been destroyed by hailstones. So, let's read the paragraph now. It's really getting bad now, exclaimed the man. I hope it passes quickly. It did not pass quickly. For an hour the hail rained on the house, the garden, the hillside, the cornfield, and on the whole valley. The field was white, as you can see in the image, as if covered with salt. Now, listen to the explanation. As the hailstones continued to fall, Lencho's happy mood began turning sad. As we can understand from the sentence when he says, It's really getting bad now. He said to himself, as we can understand, there is no one near him. And he says, I hope it passes quickly. So he was praying God that it passes quickly. But it did not pass quickly. Pass quickly means it did not stop. For an hour the hail rained on the house, the garden, the hillside, the cornfield, on the whole valley. The cornfields, which were full of flowers, hardly some time before, you imagine or you remember the initial part of the story. So, the cornfields, which were full of flowers hardly some time before, were now covered with hailstones, as you can see in the image. They were white, as if covered with white salt. So, what happened with Lencho's field? And now write down the questions. Write down important questions from this paragraph and answer them orally. Question number 1. What did Lencho hope when he saw the hailstones falling continuously? Question number 2. How did the field look like after the hailstones? And question number 3. Where did the hailstones fall? Now, let us move to next paragraph. Look at the images carefully, please, and listen to the reading and explanation. After that, write down the questions that will be given to you and answer them orally. Listen to the reading. Not a leaf remained on the trees. The corn was totally destroyed. The flowers were gone from the plants. Lencho's soul was filled with sadness. When the storm had passed, he stood in the middle of the field and said to his son, as you can see in the image, Lencho is standing in the middle of the field and raising his hands towards the sky. You can imagine we lift our hands in such posture when we, feel shocked or surprised, saying as if what has happened. You can also see how his face is telling the story of his sorrow and grief, and his eyes are, example of deep sorrow. So now look at the last part of this paragraph. So he says to his son, a plague of locusts would have left more than this. The hail has left nothing. This year we will have no corn. That night was a sorrowful one. All our work for nothing. There is no one who can help us. We will all go hungry this year. So, listen to the explanation. Not a leaf remained on the trees after the hailstones, and the flowers were now lying on the ground, as you can see in the image. The standing crops were completely damaged, destroyed, or ruined. The corn was totally destroyed. And Lencho's soul, his heart, was filled with deep sadness, deep sorrow. When the storm had passed, when it had stopped, then he went into the middle of the field. He stood in the middle of the field and said to his sons, a plague of locusts would have left more than this. The hail has left nothing. That means the hailstones have completely destroyed our livelihood, our source of livelihood. And therefore, because we have no source of livelihood, this year we will have no corn, no grains, and that night Lencho, his wife, and his children were very, very sad, sorrowful, gloomy, hopeless, because Lencho said, all our work for nothing. That means whatever work, whatever labor I had done has gone in waste. And further he said that there was no one who could help them. And he had a fear when he says that we will all go hungry this year. So after his crops are destroyed by the hailstones, he has a dark future in front of him. He has a hopeless time in front of him, and he doesn't see anyone helping him. So what will be the help? From where will he get food? From where will he get money to plant his next year's crops? That we go to see in the next part of the story. But before that, you write down important questions from this paragraph. Now write down important questions from this paragraph. Question number 1. What did the hailstones do to the field of ripe corn? Question number 2. Standing in the middle of the field, what did Lencho say to his sons? And question number 3. Why did Lencho say that they all would go hungry that year? And now, look at the image. Lencho is posting the letter to God. Do you think it will reach God? Let us see ahead. So after completing the letter, he wrote to God on the envelope, put the letter inside, and still troubled. That means he was upset. He was worried. He was anxious. Went to town. At the post office, he placed a stamp on the letter and dropped it into the mailbox. Then what happened? After the letter was dropped, or after the letter was posted in the mail, let us see. One of the employees, who was a postman and also helped at the post office, went to his boss laughing heartily and showed him the letter to God. So after Lencho posted his letter in the mail, the postman came and collected the letter. As you can see in the image, the postman has collected the letter in his hand and is laughing heartily. He's laughing loudly and is going to show this letter to his boss. And as we can see on the envelope, to God is written. So let us see how his boss is reacting. Look at the image in which the postman has delivered or given the letter of Lencho to the postmaster. And why was the postman the postman laughing at Lencho's letter. Look at the reason in the initial part of this paragraph. Never in his career as a postman had he known that address. That address means the address written on the envelope. The postmaster, a fat, amiable fellow means gentle, friendly, social, also broke out laughing. But also immediately he turned serious and tapping the letter on his desk. So you can imagine when he read the letter, he tapped it like this and commented, "What faith! I wish I had the faith of the man who wrote this letter. Starting up a correspondence with God." So we can imagine the reaction of the postmaster. So the postman was laughing at the letter of Lencho because he had never seen an address like that written on the envelope. And the postman also laughs with him for some time, but suddenly he becomes serious. Why does he become serious? Because he understands how strong faith, how unshakable faith, how deep faith the letter writer had in God. Underline the last part of this paragraph and answer the questions that are following. How did the postman react on seeing the letter to God? Why did the postman laugh? Now, write down the questions and answer them orally. Question number 1. How did the postman react on seeing the letter to God? Question number 2. Why did the postman laugh when he read the address written on the envelope? And question number 3. Which sentence in the paragraph shows Lencho's unshakable faith in God? Now, let us move ahead. Look at the image and let us understand why this man is spreading his hand like this. Look at the description. So, in order not to shake the writer's faith in God, the postmaster came up with an idea. Answer the letter. But when he opened the letter, it was evident means clear, that to answer it he needed something more than goodwill, ink and paper. But he stuck to his resolution. Resolution means his decision. He asked money for his employees. He himself gave part of his salary, and several friends of his were obliged to give something for an act of charity. Now, you think about the question why this man is spreading hand, and let me explain the paragraph. So, the postmaster did not want to shake the letter's writer's faith in God. Therefore, he came up with an idea, and the idea was to answer the letter. But when he opened the letter, it was clear that to answer the letter, only goodwill, ink and paper was not enough. He needed something more. He needed money. He needed 100 pesos. And it was not possible for him to arrange that money. So what did he do? Let us see. He asked money from his employees. He himself gave part of his salary, and several friends of his were obliged to give something for an act of charity. So, he asked money from his employees, he himself gave, and he also took money from his friends, all of whom gave the money thinking that they were doing an act of charity or a noble deed. So the question is, how was Lencho going to react when he received the envelope containing money? Let us see in the next coming paragraphs. But it was impossible for him to gather together the 100 pesos. So he was able to send the farmer only a little more than half. He put the money in an envelope addressed to Lencho, and with it a letter containing only a single word as a signature: God. So after collecting money from his employees and friends, the postmaster put the money into the letter, but he could not manage the entire amount, that means 100 pesos, because it was impossible for him to gather that amount. So whatever money had been gathered, that means collected, a little more than 50%. So putting that money into the envelope, the postmaster gave the envelope to the postman and signed it as a God. Now before we move ahead, answer a few questions. What did the postmaster decide after reading Lencho's letter? Question number 2. How did the postmaster collect money? Question number 3. How much money did the postmaster put in the envelope? Now let us move to the next paragraph. Look at the image. As we can see, the postmaster is putting the money in the envelope. And now let us read the paragraph. The following Sunday, Lencho came a bit earlier than usual to ask if there was a letter for him. It was the postman himself who handed the letter to him, while the postmaster, experiencing the contentment of a man who has performed a good deed, looked on from his office. So, Lencho had delivered his letter a week earlier. And next Sunday, he came to the post office a bit earlier, a bit earlier than usual, and asked if there was a letter for him. So, the same postman who had collected his letter handed the letter to him, while at the same time the postmaster was standing in his office and he was observing Lencho. He was watching Lencho through his window and he was feeling happy. The postmaster was feeling very satisfied that he had done a very good deed. He had done a very noble deed by arranging money for the poor farmer. Then let us what happens when Lencho collects the money and counts it. Look at the image. In the first image, Lencho is counting the money which has been given by the postmaster. And in the second image, we can see Lencho is in a very angry mood. So why is Lencho furious? Why is Lencho so angry? Let us understand it from the given description. Lencho showed not the slightest surprise on seeing the money. Such was his confidence. But he became angry when he counted the money. Why did he become angry? God could not have made a mistake, nor could he have denied Lencho what he had requested. So, Lencho was given the envelope containing the money. And after opening the envelope, he was not surprised at all. He was not, he did not show any surprise. His confidence, his faith in God was so strong. But when he counted the money, he became angry. He became furious. Why did he become furious? Look at the last part of the paragraph. God could not have made a mistake, nor could he have denied Lencho what he had requested. So when he counted the money, he found that the money was not 100 pesos. It was not total money. It was a little more than half. So he thought that this mistake must not have been made by God. God could not deny him 100 pesos. So he started doubting someone. He started suspecting that the money, which is not in full sum, has been stolen. So can you guess whom did he suspect? Whom did he doubt? Let us see in the last paragraph. Then some questions will be given and the story will come to an end. So let us see the last paragraph. Look at the image. As we can see, Lencho is handing over a letter to the postmaster. And the letter that postmaster is receiving is the second letter of Lencho. And what has Lencho written in this letter? Let us see in the paragraph, last paragraph of this story. So, when he finished, he went to the window to buy a stamp, which he licked and had then affixed to the envelope with a blow of his fist. The moment the letter fell into the mailbox, the postmaster went to open it. It said, that means the letter read, God, of the money that I asked for, only 70 pesos reached me. Send me the rest, since I need it very much, but don't send it to me through the mail, because the post office employees are a bunch of crooks. Lencho. So what we see at the end of the story, when after finishing his letter, Lencho went to the window to buy a stamp, and after buying the stamp, he licked the stamp with his tongue and then pasted it on the envelope. After that, he went into the mailbox. He went to the mailbox and then posted it. Soon after the letter was dropped into the mailbox, the postmaster went there and picked up the letter and started reading. So look at the last part of the paragraph once again. This is very, very important. Lencho had written to God in his second letter, God, of the money that I asked for, only 70 pesos reached me. Send me the rest. That means send me the 30 pesos, since I need it very much. But don't send it to me through the mail, because the post office employees are a bunch of crooks. A bunch of crooks means a group of or a gang of cheats, corrupted people. So you do not send the money through the mail, you send directly to me. So in this way, the story ends on an ironic note. Irony means the same people who helped Lencho were doubted, were suspected, and were called a bunch of crooks or corrupt people. So this is the irony on which the story ends. And I do believe that you must have understood the story. So before we move to other chapter, let us answer some of the questions from this paragraph. Write down the questions on a notebook and answer them orally. Question number 1. What did the postmaster experience when the postman handed the envelope containing the money to Lencho? Question number 2. How did Lencho react when he counted the money? Why did he react so? Question number 3.